many times have you said to yourself, I'm going to succeed, and yet you keep coming up short? You probably notice that high achievers with heart do things differently, but you just can't put your finger on it. You're curious about why high achievers accomplish more and have more satisfying relationships. It's because success is the result of your mindset and the consistent actions you take. This show is designed with your success in mind. By revealing these powerful patterns of our dynamic individuals and guest experts, you can model what they do and apply to your future success now. Let's roll up our sleeves and get started. My name is Brigitta Hoeferle, and this is the Success Patterns Show. And we are here live today on a totally different setup. Well, it's not totally different. It's a little bit different. This is the Success Patterns Show Couples Edition, and I couldn't be more excited to have my best half with me today, Christian Hoeferle. Christian, the culture guy, thanks for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me. It's exciting. Not really sure how this will work, but this is awesome. Yeah, couples edition, right? Couples edition.
So let's talk about this first. So Christian and I have been married for 21 years, and I don't know if you can tell because we're in a virtual world, but we have our wedding band on our right side, on our right finger.
This is my right hand.
And this is my right hand as well. So we got married 21 years ago in Germany. Actually, my dad married us, which was a really cool experience in a small chapel in the outskirts of Munich. Well, it's basically tucked away in the Alps. Would you say?
The foothills of the Alps.
The foothills of the Alps. It's beautiful. Christian gave me a beautiful picture for Christmas this year. Christian has his own company, The Culture Mastery. I have my own company. We have companies together. We have children together.
That's true.
We live together.
The children have nothing to do with our companies.
That's true. Yeah, I would say that's true. And we're here at the center of training where we are, where we have our studio and where we have our trainings. So I said, Christian, wouldn't it be great? Because so many people ask us, how do you have it all, Brigitta? And honestly, do we have it all?
No.
I don't think anyone has it all, honestly.
What is all?
Yeah, what is all? That's a really good question. And people ask us, especially, Christian works with individuals and companies and organizations. I work with individuals, companies, and organizations. And individually, they ask us, how do you manage a work-life balance? How do you juggle a family and work and kids and dog and trainings and travel? So household, big one. How do you juggle it all?
Well, I cannot juggle it. At some point in my life, I realized it's hard to juggle this all by myself, and having a life partner makes that juggling a lot easier if you and your life partner know how to juggle together. And I think that's the stuff that's not intuitively there for most couples. I know it wasn't there for us. We had to find out how do we juggle together and who's good at juggling what and who's better at juggling something else. And that may need some readjustment throughout the relationship, and finding that balance of who does what and to which extent and who's good at something and who's better at something else. I think that is the relationship secret sauce.
So people might ask, and I want to invite you to ask in the comments questions about the show now and things that we're going to address in the future, because this is the first of many couples editions that Christian and I are going to do. We're going to try to do it once a month.
So I need to dress up like this more often?
Yeah, you do.
Okay.
And with actual pants and shoes.
Here, pants, shoes.
So you're saying I know I know the answer to this, but for the people that are watching, that we didn't get married and we weren't already in sync and we didn't already have everything figured out. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
How so?
Maybe you remember this, but there was a time when we started living together, and this was before we actually had put a ring on our relationship. We both come from an environment where it is socially acceptable to share a home and build a nest together without having formalized the actual wedding and marriage procedures. So we had a home together, and we were about to get married. And there was a time when, how do I say this without putting you on the spot right now, but we were questioning whether and how to proceed. And I think there was one particular day when there was a breakdown, right, between you and I, and you were
Just one?
the one that I remember vividly. It included tears and it included different moods on both of our ends, and we were redefining how the juggling would happen, how we would how we would align ourselves, because we were not teenagers when we met. We were fully grown, well, some might say fully grown adults. That's to be debated. But we were in our mid-late 20s when we decided that this is the person that I want to spend the rest of my life with. And at that point, we've developed our own routines, our own belief systems, our own habits of either successfully or somewhat successfully going through life. And those two worlds had to come together. We wanted those two worlds to come together. And that didn't happen intuitively. We had to make a conscious effort. And I would suspect that many couples in the world have a similar journey where paths want to merge, right? Imagine an on-ramp on the freeway, or where two highways meet and traffics have to merge onto common lanes. And sometimes that happens quite elegantly. Sometimes there is a traffic jam because there's different expectations of how to do this, right? And we've met those roadblocks. If we stick with the highway metaphor, we met those roadblocks, we met those traffic jams and those unelegant attempts at merging lanes.
And that takes work, and that takes agreements, and that takes open line of communication. I actually remember one time that we went, the kids were little and we already lived in the States, and we went to go canoeing. Do you remember that, on the Nanahala River?
Oh yeah, nightmare. Or daymare. It was trying to kayak and paddle, I guess, in sync, and that didn't go very well.
That didn't go very well, and we decided we're not going to do that again. And I remember many years later, we went to Martha's Vineyard, and we were again in the kayak, and I decided I'm not going to row with Christian. So, you know, you got to know what you want, and you got to know what you don't want. And even within a relationship, it's okay to sometimes say, look, we're not in sync, and we're either going to find a way to get to merge or to become in sync and to paddle together, or we paddle individually. And that's fine as well when both sides agree.
I would even go a step further and say, do you always have to be in sync? Do you always have to be aligned? Because in a relationship that lasts as long as ours has, and lasts as long as we wish for our relationship to continue, there will be aspects of life where you or I, or we both agree that it's best to do this separately. Case in point, this program, this show, I've been a guest on your show before. I don't manage this program. If you haven't produced a show like this, you probably don't know how much logistics and preparation and technology goes into this. There's a lot of prep work stuff that you don't see as you watch this. I am not involved in producing your show. I show up in a clean shirt and a jacket, and I need a haircut. But other than that, I show up, right? There is nothing I have done to make this work. So this is a project that you do independently of me. I have similar projects that are around live streaming or podcasting as well, in which you're not involved, right? So there are in a, at least in our definition of a healthy relationship, we will be traveling on separate lanes for a while, and the destination is clear. We know we both want to arrive at the same destination. Sometimes the paths we take there will be different lanes. Sometimes it might actually be a different highway. It might be, for one of us, it might be a detour because we need to make a additional stop that the other doesn't need. And yet we have the agreement, that's what you said earlier, right? The structure and the common goals. We know where we want to arrive at. And that's when everything works well between the two of us. And I would argue in more than it works well more than it doesn't. We arrive at the same location, maybe not always at the same time, but we arrive at the same location.
What would you say is a pattern that you are aware of that we have that supports the health of our relationship?
Well, those patterns were...
There are many.
Yeah, I was going to say there are many patterns. They're evolving, and some of those patterns we threw out because we realized they don't work any longer.
Well, yeah, or they don't work any longer. Why?
Because they were inefficient. They left more questions unanswered than they were.
Yeah, and from where I'm standing or sitting in this case, it's also that we outgrew them, or
True.
Or our children outgrew them, because now we have children. We're almost empty nesters. High five for that.
Not sure.
No.
Are you sure about being?
No, I was trying to convince myself by high-fiving you.
All right. Good.
So we're almost empty nesters, and we started building our businesses when our children were babies, when they were little. So, I mean, great timing. High five for that.
There's no ideal time for children. Yes, there are success patterns that worked at some point in our lives, and now they don't anymore. We outgrew them. Our children outgrew them. Our businesses outgrew them. We abandoned certain processes or certain patterns because they led us to this level, and then we wanted to reach a higher level, and we needed different agreements, different way of collaborating, different way of aligning ourselves. Plus, you got to keep in mind, when we met, we were in our late 20s. Now we won't say, but she said how long we were married, so you do the math. So now it's not only the biological aging, it's also the mental maturing that is happening. So patterns that worked for me when I was in my late 20s, I could not get through the day today with those patterns, right? So as we grow older, as we mature, then we set different priorities in life. We have different things that are important to us, and we start the day and end the day differently than we did in our 20s. Just suffice to say that we go to bed earlier.
I've always gone to bed early.
Sure.
So I want to speak to, of course, we have many patterns, and we're going to go through them, not on this show, all of them on this show. That's why we have many shows coming up. One of the supportive patterns that I don't think we were aware of for the beginning of our relationship was that you really value and appreciate knowledge. Well, I somehow knew that because when I met Christian, he was a journalist, and he was like the interrogator. When he met some of my friends or family or anyone that we were in, meeting, he would ask them all of these questions. And I'm like, why are you interrogating people? You're making them super uncomfortable. You're making me uncomfortable. And it took me years to understand.
You speak in the past tense. You think I don't do that anymore?
No, I speak in the past tense that it annoyed me.
Okay. It does not annoy you anymore.
I understand it now.
Okay.
I can relate to it now because I can relate to what you value, that you're a high logic, information, knowledge-based person, and that you're also processing information internally.
I do.
Like when we drive to, or when the kids were little and we would drive to Florida, we haven't done that in quite some time. Christian, he's the driver and the kids would have their own little radio show in the back, and I would probably be sleeping in the front seat. And then I would wake up and we would be, 5 hours in, 6 hours into the ride. And Christian would start talking to me about, everything that he's thought about the last 6 hours. And he would ask me, what do you think about that? And I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. I have not been on this conversation the last 6 hours. So you need to fill me in. That's how he works.
In my mind, you were. So yes, I'm probably what some people might call a bit in my head, a little bit cerebral. And if you've ever been around neurolinguistic programming and NLP, then when I say that I am more audio digital and a little bit, in the personality archetypes, I'm a high knowledge person, then that would explain a little bit. For those of you who are simply still getting started with that journey of self-discovery, there are different ways of experiencing our lives, and some people do it more externally and other people do it more internally. I'm not saying that I'm an introvert, by no means. I can be very demanding of a room, right? As some people would even argue, some people that I'm very close to might argue that I like to dominate the conversation here and there. So I'm by no means an introvert. However, I am somebody who processes a lot of data, who has a high level of curiosity, and I think I have a need for more information. And that's why you thought I interrogate people, where I think of myself as being inherently interested in people and want to find out about them. So intent and impact don't always match up. So my intention was to find out. Brigitta probably thought that the impact of my behavior was a little bit too nosy and too inquisitive.
Would you say that your way of asking questions and being curious has shifted?
Yes.
How so?
I've become better over time in obtaining the information that satisfies my need for knowing. In the past, I probably would have done this in a more confrontational way, or in a less, in a way with very low emotional intelligence. I would come from my model of the world, and the way I would ask people questions probably only reflected my model of the world and did not take into account theirs. So that way, my curiousness might have easily come across as inquisition. I think I've become better. I am still becoming better at asking questions in a open way, in a non-judgmental, non-violent way, and in a way that lets people recognize I am interested in you, and because I want to know more about you, rather than being a police detective interrogating them for a crime they didn't commit.
How is that important when you build relationship? And relationships are built not just romantically, but also with friends, and especially with your staff, your team, the individuals in your team, your clients, your customers, your patients, whichever field you're in. So understanding, or maybe we use the word relating to the other, is so much more important than understanding who you are. Which one comes first?
Well, I'm not sure if I'm giving the answer you're expecting. I think what comes first is know thyself, right? I can only create, for me at least in my model, where I can only relate to somebody else if I know what my baseline is. If I know who am I, what are my values, what drives me in life, and as I then go about finding out what you value and what's relevant in your life, I can find out and compare against my value set. So that's what brought us together, right? We had a conversation about our lives, our stories, what led us to our meeting, and we find out that there is a lot that we share in our history, that we have a lot in common interests, that there are also some fields that we have very different experiences, and that I would argue, I'm being very in my head right now, that led us to be compatible and led us to say, okay, we like each other based on that. But I could only find love for you knowing who I am, right? And I guess you could only find love for me knowing what's important to you and how I might be able to complement that.
Wow, there's so many things I want to unpack here.
Ooh.
The first one is the difference between Christian and I. We already touched a little bit that he's very cerebral, knowledge-based, information-based, logical. One might even say he lives in his maybe left hemisphere of his brain. I am the opposite. I am outgoing, bubbly, very visual. I'll probably, build the plane on the way down, where Christian would first engineer the plane. So that's how we're different. And when we met, the difference was also actually really interesting and funny, because Christian was a journalist for a publishing house in Munich. I worked for a publishing house also in Munich, a different publishing house, but we were on opposite sides.
I was an editorial. I was the journalist. She was not. She was on the sales and marketing side, which the writing and content producing part of the team is not always the best friends of the sales and marketing side of the team, because sales and marketing said, hey, I got customers who want to advertise with us, so we need to please the customers. No, we need to please the readers. So the customers, that's a different story, right?
So I would come into the editorial office. Of course, Christian wasn't there because he worked for a different publishing house. But I would say, hey, we have L'Oreal as a client. Can we do a story around their newest product? And the editorial will go, no, why would we do that? And I'm like, well, because they pay a whole lot of money to put, full page ads.
Pay my bills. So we
so that was a different.
Even though we had commonality in the industry that we worked in, we were in different departments, not necessarily the departments that would have a lot of professional overlap.
Right. And I had someone on the show, Mark Johnson, a few weeks ago, and I loved what he said, that especially nowadays, that, seeing and appreciating the other, whoever the other is, the person that is not like me, in terms of values, in terms of how they process information, in terms of religion or political views, or what others is there.
Well, we could add value systems. We could add cultural background. We could add socioeconomics. We could add marital status, parent, yes or no.
And then within
the owner, yes or no.
And then within parenting, are you more of a very, it's kind of loosey-goosey kind of parenting, or are you a hovering kind of parent? So there's so many others from ourselves. And I love what Mark said, is really exploring the commonalities that we have rather than the differences. And I think that is one thing that you teach in your training.
Mm-hmm. We work with, when I say we, I mean myself and my side of our relationship, the stuff that Brigitta doesn't always get involved with. We work with multinationals and people who cross cultures for work and life. And we encourage our clients that, despite the differences that they encounter, to look for they might have in common with those they consider to be other, right?
Yeah. So there's a success pattern there in finding the commonality, in appreciating, or at least tolerating how the other person is different, and going on the journey and being curious of how you can relate and what kind of common ground you can find. Um, there was something else that you said earlier: when we are building relationships and when we are continuing to have a um, a respectful relationship, that we can actually go further, that we can explore things on a deeper level, because we have that common ground, we have respect for each other. We might have even a great track record in one area where it worked really, really well, that we can then use in another area that it might have not worked so well. So maybe we should try the kayak. Let's go for a kayak outing again.
Well, it didn't always go bad. So the example that Brigitta is referring to is two adults and two children being in a kayak canoe type of floating on the water device that you only propel with paddles and oars. And in order to do this efficiently, it would behoove the people who do this activity to do this synchronized in a way that propels each other forward. And I think we tend to be strong personalities, or some might say we are a little bit stubborn sometimes.
Me?
Yes, I am. You speak for yourself. So that expresses itself in who wants to take the lead, who gets to call the shots, right? And often in our relationship, we have come to an agreement who gets to lead which activity. And in that kayaking experience, there was no agreement, there was no plan. We went about it without thinking how we're going to do this. And it turned out that we stood in each other's way, or that we made it cumbersome for one another because we failed to get in sync, literally, in synchronizing our motions in order to move forward.
Yeah, we didn't move forward a lot.
And there was a high degree of frustration, and add to that the fact that children are trying to follow their parents' lead, and the parents were giving them mixed signals, so that didn't work either. So we learned that day that we failed we got the feedback that our attempt at being aligned was unsuccessful. So we've been in other boats together, literally boats, where we had to propel ourselves, and it did work, right? So it's not that we didn't learn from that.
No, that's true. It was good learning. It was a frustrating learning experience for me, and we did learn a lot.
And you seem to remember that a lot, because I had to go rummage through my memory. What is she talking about? Oh, that thing. Okay.
Really, that's funny. So you said planning, and I wanna keep that for our next conversation, where when individuals in a relationship plan together, that we talked a lot about agreements today, that there are agreements made, that there's a clear structure in place on how to move forward, and that everyone in the team, and we're a team of two, but we also have our own teams individually, know in which direction to go. So I want to keep that for our next conversation, and I want to invite you to share in the comments what questions do you have, what adversities do you have in your relationship, and perhaps we can give you some guidance, perhaps we can even relate to them, and find another fun story. So in the comments, share with us what you want to ask us, talking points, anything that you want to learn, or just a comment that you want to leave. So thank you for tuning in today.
May I add something before you let them go?
Yeah.
I see this as an exercise that I wasn't pulled into, but this is an idea that Brigitta had. So I was like, okay, let's do this. This sounds like a fun exercise. I am very careful in positioning myself as somebody who would be giving advice or guidance to other people in their relationship. I can only come from our perspective on what we have together.
For sure.
And just not too long ago, there was a holiday, quote unquote holiday in the Western world called Valentine's Day, where people celebrate their loved ones in a particular way. And you had the fun idea of posting a collage of pictures of us in various
rather funny pictures,
staged scenarios. And there were quite a few comments online about the pictures. And there were some comments that went along the lines of my favorite power couple, or other phrases similar to that. And while I respect that comment, I don't necessarily see ourselves as a quote unquote power couple. We are, I don't know what, quite frankly, I don't even know what that means. So we are a team of two, and we make it work day to day. And there are times when it doesn't work well, and I'm not going to sugarcoat this, neither will you, I guess. And there are times when it works really, really well, and none of us would want to have it any other way. So I'm careful not to position this as, hey, here we come from the ivory tower of relationship success, and we descend upon you to let you know how to lead a good relationship. No. This is something that we see as a dialogue and an interchange and an exchange of ideas and experiences. So yes, the comment section there is for you to share your perspective. We would like to learn from you, from your successes or your feedbacks or mistakes when stuff didn't work, and what did you learn from it, and how did you come up with a better success pattern for your relationship?
Yeah, love that. Thank you for clarifying that. So until next time, make sure that you tune in again next week for the Success Pattern Show, same time, same place at 4:30, right here at the Success Pattern Show. Until then, thanks, Christian, for being here. Appreciate it.
I mean, do I have a choice?
Yeah, you did have a choice.
Oh, okay, good.
Thank you for tuning in, and you will notice opportunities to apply success patterns daily while eagerly anticipating next week's content-rich success patterns.